Today, we're very excited to shed some light on modular housing construction and its potential to assist Canadian municipalities in confronting the housing crisis. My name is Evan Clark, and I'm the Manager of Partnerships and Sponsorships at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and I'm pleased to welcome our presenting partners from the Canadian Standards Association for this important discussion. As FCM moves forward with our commitment to reconciliation, I want to acknowledge that FCM's head office is located on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. As an organization, FCM endeavors to unlearn colonial mindsets and practices, grow in knowledge, and adapt our ways of working. As we continue to build meaningful relationships, we recognize the historic and ongoing contributions of Indigenous peoples and honor their leadership and partnership in shaping and strengthening communities across the country. I welcome you all to acknowledge the land you are joining us from. Before I turn things over to the experts today, I have a few housekeeping items to mention. L'interprétation simultanée est disponible pour notre session aujourd'hui. Pour accéder à l'audio en français, il faut simplement cliquer la petite icône du globe au bas de l'écran vers la droite et sélectionner le français. If you do not select a language, you will hear live audio in English. Je vous donne quelques secondes pour faire le choix de langue.
Okay, we're going to get through it.
If you'd like to ask a question today, my colleagues have posted a link to a Slido page where you can write those questions in. If we plan to leave ample time for questions towards the end of today's sessions, which I will help facilitate by pulling your questions from Slido. Folks, if you could please mute yourselves, thank you. That would be appreciated. Finally, please note this session is being recorded and will be available on demand on the FCM website. Now, please allow me to introduce today's guest experts. First, we welcome Tom Hardiman as the official spokesperson for the modular construction industry. Sorry, I'm going to start that again. First, please welcome Tom Hardiman as the official spokesperson for the modular construction industry. Tom has been involved in leadership roles in modular construction since 2004, when he was named the executive director of the Modular Building Institute. In 2012, he took on the additional role of executive director for the Modular Home Builders Association. Tom has extensive experience as an advocate on various legislative, regulatory, and building code issues at the provincial and federal levels in both Canada and the United States. He was one of the leading forces behind the creation of the Off-Site Construction Council at the National Institute of Building Science and has served on its board since its inception. We are also joined by Dwayne Torrey, the Director of Construction and Infrastructure Standards at Canadian Standards Association, a global organization dedicated to safety and social good and sustainability. In his role, Dwayne helps define the strategic path for standards and codes that support safe and reliable structures, construction materials, products, systems, and mechanical safety equipment. Through continuous assessment of emerging construction trends, Dwayne and his team have advanced critical issues such as modular buildings, building information modeling, climate resilience, circular construction, decarbonization of materials. Dwayne has over 25 years of experience in construction and engineering, including 20 years with CSA. We also welcome Yasik Sohashi, Manager of Design, Construction, and Asset Management within the Works Division at the Regional Municipality of Durham. Yasik is an architect who brings hands-on experience in modular residential construction, applying innovation and scalable building methods that support efficient and sustainable development. His expertise strengthens the region's efforts to modernize public infrastructure and advance climate-conscious design. Finally, to formally get us underway, it's my great pleasure to introduce our moderator, Jen Arntfield. Jen is the Senior Manager of Policy and Research at FCM, focusing on housing and homelessness policy and programs. She led the design and implementation of the Sustainable Affordable Housing Program within the Green Municipal Fund, and Jen previously led affordable housing strategy, policy, and research for a municipal government. Over to you, Jen.
So much, Evan, for getting us going. And thanks for everyone for joining today. I'm really excited to get to talk to these experts about modular construction. I just wanted to kind of set a baseline of our understanding very, very briefly.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Oh, just gonna make sure everybody's muted as we get going. Um, okay, very briefly, when we're talking about modular construction, we're talking about fabricating building components or kind of modules, if you will, in an off-site controlled environment like a factory, which are then transported to a construction site and assembled there. FCM has been advocating for the federal government to support the prefabricated and modular housing sector as a way to meet the goal of doubling housing construction in the next decade. Many municipalities across the country have successfully used modular housing to address homelessness and build affordable housing. And we're very fortunate that we get to hear about one great example of this today. We have been really pleased to see the government commit to mainstreaming this kind of modern and advanced construction through the new Build Canada Homes. And we saw that reiterated in yesterday's budget as well. So that makes today's conversation super timely. So if everyone stays muted, we will get into it now. I'm gonna start by asking Jacek to tell us about a recent modular project that was completed in Durham. I find having like a concrete example super helpful for me in terms of kind of bringing a topic to life. So we're gonna start there. So over to you, Jacek.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah, my name is Jacek Sochacki. I'm the manager of design, construction, and asset management group for the region of Durham. And I'm just going to share the presentation with you guys right now. Okay. So very quickly, for those who don't know, Durham is a regional municipality. So we're a Upper-tier municipality. We're located on the east end of Toronto, part of the GTA. It's the largest municipality when it comes to the area. About 800,000 people live in an area, and we go all the way from the Lake Ontario all the way to Lake Simcoe. Currently, recently we actually have done 2 projects using modular construction for both were housing projects, and both were realized thanks to the Rapid Housing Initiative funding. Going forward. So first one of these projects is it was a series of what we call these micro homes. So when you quickly look at them, they're 5 units in each area. So we have 10 units in total. 2 of these units were accessible. We required ability to relocate those units in the future to different locations. So that's actually built into this. As a region right now, we have a climate emergency as well. We have very high GHG emission reduction goals. Most of our new facilities are built with no GHG emission on site. That means every mechanical system within the buildings is run by electricity. And due to the maintenance requirements, also we required a separate service space. So when we looked at that, the modular construction made so much sense for us to do. This was actually, these units were installed in Oshawa, so that's one of our lower-tier municipalities, in a build-up area. So thanks to the modular construction, we were able to reduce the time on site as well as construction waste. So here you can see some renderings that we've done. So on the left-hand side is the renderings that were done on the proposed facilities. And on the right side is actually the finished product when we had them. So they actually look pretty the same, I would say. Here's the renderings of the units. There you can see some of the plans. They're smaller units. They're supportive housing units. So these were they're transitional housing. So these units were designed to help people move up to the next level. So you go in, the unit is fully functional. It has a full kitchen, laundry facility. You have a washroom as well. So everything that you would have in your home is just a smaller scale. And we also had number of out of the 10 units, like I said, 5 of them were 2 of them were accessible units. And here you can see in the back here of the units, it's a separate unit that was put in across that housed all the mechanical. So all the water heating, electrical switchboard, everything was put in separately. So it's easy to access for the maintenance guys. They don't have to disturb the tenants. And this worked out pretty well. So the beauty of this, actually the units were manufactured inside the factory. So it's an enclosed space. We're able to go in as well as the designers to have inspections during the construction. It's almost like a car assembly line, right? Like with those units on how they're being built. So we were able to see different stages of construction. on these, and it was relatively rapid, and then they were delivered on site. Obviously, we did some site work in preparation for the units to come in, so the connections to all the services, as well as some initial reinforcement and for the foundation work. And after the units were delivered, it took them about 2 months for the unit to be fully occupied. So this project, just to let you know in a time frame, we actually started the construction. We signed the contract in August of 22, and units were operational in March. We actually have people move in already in March of 23. So really rapid construction and then rapidly being here. Again, these are a little bit on a smaller scale compared to the next project that we're going to talk about. So this is more of a bigger scale of a project that we did that utilized different type of modular construction, which was very exciting for us. 47 unit supportive housing facility. Out of that, 7 units are accessible. We also had a hub space designed for community uses as well as program support spaces. Full commercial kitchen. We do have a dining room for 47 people to, if they want to, they can use that. Again, no GHG emission and extensive solar PV array. At the time of installation, that was actually the biggest one that we had. Again, modular construction really reduced time on site and reduced construction waste. When we went to this facility, these are renderings that we had presented. So this facility is located in Beaverton, on essentially shores of Lake Simcoe. So it's beautiful location. We have a long-term care facility that's not too far from it, so we're trying to make sure that it's going to work. But I think one of the things to kind of say about this, that this doesn't look like a modular construction that you would think of, right? And that's one of the things that we're striving for. The company that we're using, NRB, hired, again, was using design build contract. They hired MSA, a company that did number of these type of projects in Toronto, and they were well understood the limitations and possibilities also of modular construction. So I think that was one of the goals, to have a facility that's not going to look like a typical modular build. Again, very simple units that's repeatable, and that's the beauty of modular things, that it's easy for us to do. The units were kind of back to back, so the building came in together very, very quickly. The assembly of this building, when you see the bigger units coming in, took about, I would say, 2 weeks. So logistic was a big piece of this, right? The facilities for this company were actually located in Cambridge and Grimsby. So portions were built in different areas, and we had to do a staging yard in between for the units to be kind of delivered there, and then just facilitate very quick unloading on the site. Although it is a rural site, the access to it through the road next to a subdivision was relatively limited, and we wanted to minimize the time that we're going to be kind of stopping the road. And these are actually pictures from the actual building itself right now, from the site that was taken in the fall. And when you look at it, it doesn't look anything as like you would think of a module. The beauty of this thing too, that we actually utilized different building techniques, I guess, with module. So the main building that you can see in the background in the middle of the picture, which is houses the residential units, it's built with typical wood construction. Whenever the front portion of it is actually built using steel and concrete modules going forward. And this is the view from the top to show you the extent of the site and the solar panels on the roof. So from the top, it looks like any other construction that you would do on a normal basis. Just to quickly let you know too about the timing of this. The timing of this project, from the start to construction, we scheduled that to be done within a year. So we started this actually in September. And we had the building operational pretty much end of September year after. So again, very rapidly, and doing both site preparation and construction of the units really speeds up the process. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, like that's so helpful. And also, I just, looking at those buildings, beautiful buildings, I think really helps bust some myths around not only modular construction, but just also about affordable housing and supportive housing as well, that it can look really beautiful and integrate just so nicely into neighborhoods as well. So I really love seeing that example, so thank you for that.
Yeah,
Before we
one thing
get
if
into some of the questions, oh yeah,
yes,
please,
one thing if I
please.
may add, we also, because it is a quite unique site, we did receive number of architectural awards, like a Canadian Architect Gold Award for the design of that. Well, the designers did, as well as the International One Award for the supportive housing facilities. So just a little add on that.
Excellent. Well, I can see why. It's a lovely building, and I also love to see those environmental outcomes as well. We're not going to get into audience questions yet, but this is a very relevant question, so why don't we just address it right now, because I saw it pop up. There's just a question here about the water and sewage. Did that already exist? Like, were I guess, like the utilities already at the site? Or how did you connect the utilities on the site on this?
Right. So I think the beauty of that construction is that happens at the same time. So as the units are being built within the factories, we are doing all the work on site. So the contractors coming in and they're doing all the connections and prepping the foundations to be ready. So when the units come in, we just kind of, they're kind of put in there and there's connections being made. Same thing when you look at the units when they're designed, how it's done. For example, we had back-to-back units with a corridor in between for residential pieces. So the corridors were not finished, but the units themselves were finished to the level that we had furniture and appliances within the units when they were delivered via crane. So all the connections were done within the corridors. So that really limits the amount of time that we require to kind of get the building operational.
I see some more interest, but I'm gonna let's pause it there, and we'll get to some audience questions after we go through a few things. I wanted to invite both Dwayne and Tom as well to just give us a very quick overview of what each of your organizations do, if you can, particularly as it relates to modular construction. Dwayne, why don't we start with you?
All right, thanks so much, Jen, and great to see everybody today. Yeah, at CSA, we have a really long history in modular construction. In fact, our work goes back a really long time. Our first modular-related standard was published actually in the early 1970s, and it was called CSA A277. And that standard set out the procedures for certifying prefabricated buildings. And it was really groundbreaking at the time, and it remains sort of the foundation for the modular certification that we still have today. But if you fast forward to 2019, CSA launched research to explore the regulatory framework for modular construction in Canada. The work identified some gaps and opportunities. It informed our policy paper as well. It was called Seizing the Modular Construction Opportunity. And that helped raise awareness amongst both regulators and industry. But one thing our research did was it informed a series of new standards and guidance documents to support modular adoption that we've created over the last 5 years. And just a sampling of that work. The first thing that we did was we created something to solve the problem for who does what, and that's CSA Z250. So that's a process standard we created for delivering volumetric modular buildings. It works out all the handoffs and sort of clears up some of the misconceptions there. Then we jumped into helping out the regulators. So we created a guideline called CSA Z252, and that's a guide for compliance and approval processes. So that's designed to help the authorities and the inspectors navigate those modular projects. Now, both of these complement CSA 277, which is still in existence, and it provides clarity for the manufacturers, for the regulators, for the builders. And then one more thing that we're doing right now, that's CSA Z251, and it's a design standard. So that's going to help build the knowledge base and the confidence for the designers, the builders, those that are creating the modular units. And we're planning on bringing that out early 2026, so just in a few short months. But to close that knowledge gap, we've also been working on online training courses. So we have one called Modular Construction Projects, Delivery Certification and Approvals Processes. A couple hours long, self-paced, and explains the differences between modular and conventional construction, some of the key planning steps and best practices. And it's actually a free course for anybody to take. And so it's a really, really simple thing to point people to. So from the first standards in the 1970s to the research that we've been doing today, the standards and the training, we've been trying to be at that forefront of modular construction, working with MBI and other key stakeholders. So our goal is simple: to try to provide those tools and the knowledge that's going to make modular, safe, efficient, widely adopted across the Canadian building sector.
Well, I'll jump in and thank you, Jen, for having me here today. Echo a little bit of what Dwayne said. My name is Tom Hardiman. I'm the Executive Director of the Modular Building Institute, or MBI. We are an international nonprofit trade association serving, as you might have guessed, the modular construction industry. We have about 700 member companies globally, about 75 of which are in Canada. The organization's been around since 1983, so this modular thing isn't exactly new. I've been the director for a little over 20 of those years. So Dwayne, it sounds like we kind of came in our roles about the same time. And really based in Charlottesville, Virginia, about 2 hours south of DC. That's the international headquarters. We work with Proof Strategies in Canada to help us deliver our government affairs services and member services. And have worked with CMHC. We've worked with Dwayne and CSA for years on the development of these standards, working more recently with the federal government on the Build Canada Homes initiative, which I imagine we'll get into in a bit. But modular.org, we're really just the trade association resource information hub, if you will, for all things modular.
Thanks so much. I'm loving all of the engagement already. We've already got some good questions coming up, and we will get to as many of them as we can. But just in the context of some of your opening remarks, there's been some requests for some of the materials or courses that were mentioned, and I'm wondering if they can ultimately be shared in the chat for everyone at some point, maybe towards the end. Okay, excellent. Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so I wanted to kind of start maybe by asking Dwayne and Tom to speak to, and of course everyone's welcome to jump in and answer any of these, but can you speak to what some of the common myths and misperceptions are out there around modular construction?
Yeah, I'll jump in first, and then Dwayne and Jacek, feel free to jump in and correct me. I've been around for 20 years. There's a couple kind of old stereotypes or misconceptions that are maybe still floating around. One is that these are lower quality. They're cheap. It's a cheap, wobbly box. And the other is that it is cheaper to build this way than it is to build conventionally on site. And I'll get back to that one. Those are really both a little inaccurate. It is not a lower quality. It is actually higher quality, higher standards, more inspection protocols, more oversight, less waste, all the things Jacek mentioned in his case study. So the perception of lower quality is just not a reality at all. The perception that modular is cheaper or should be cheaper to build, that comes with a lot of caveats. It really depends on the project, the team, the location, how much experience your team has building these things, and I'll certainly turn it over to let the others elaborate, but not necessarily automatically cheaper upfront on a dollar for dollar. And then one more of a newer myth that I've heard is that modular is the solution for the housing crisis. And I just want to put a little, set some expectations. We are not the solution. We can play a bigger role in helping to solve the housing crisis, but we're really just another construction methodology that every municipality should have in their tool belt. We're not going to replace conventional construction or other forms, but we should be part of that conversation. We should be supplementing the overall building efforts. So those are the ones I've heard. I don't know if Dwayne or Jacek has other suggestions or ideas.
Yeah, glad to jump in. Yeah, Tom, you're absolutely right about the it's not the solution. With the housing crisis we have going on, we need sort of all hands on deck. So traditional, conventional, stick-built construction supplemented with modular construction. We need to sort of find every way to do this, especially, with some of the labor shortage problems that, are already here. I was going to say coming, but already here. I mentioned the policy paper we did back in 2024 is the seizing the modular construction opportunity. And I'm going to drop that into the chat at the end. But it's a free document that we put out that provides a really clear explanation of why modular construction represents more than just like a passing trend. It's a practical approach. There's expedited project completion approaches, enhanced quality, and addresses a whole bunch of challenges. But the paper did also tackle some of those myths. And Tom covered, one of the key ones, the cheaper and faster. And yes, there's a lot of yes buts there, right? It's got to be done right. It's got to have the right coordination, and a lot of things have to come into play. But the other ones one is that modular is all or nothing. You don't have to do a modular or a conventional. People often think that you have to build the entire structure out of modularity. And it's not true. You can mix and match. You can have modular wings in a hospital or a school, or even modular, pods. So it's strategic decision making that has to happen during the planning stage, really, really early on. Another one is that labor shortages don't affect modular construction. It still needs skilled labor, so it faces similar challenges as traditional construction. But the difference is that factory settings allow for some automation, shorter schedules can help with flexibility, but it's never going to be a magic fix, right? And then I think the third one I would mention is that zoning bylaws prohibit modular. I've heard that a few times, and generally, if a modular building meets the code, zoning shouldn't really be an issue. The challenge is proving compliance, because local processes are sometimes designed for conventional builds. And that extra time can eat into that speed advantage. So, I think the big takeaway is it isn't that one size fits all solution, but it's really, really powerful tool when used in the right way.
So much on that, kind of like using it the right way, and just I'd love to dig in a little bit more about some of the potential, recognizing, and I do really appreciate that caveat. It's not the be all end all, but it is one solution, and there are good reasons. I think that there's been a focus on this recently as a way to speed up some construction, but interested to dig into that a little bit more. Maybe I'll start with Tom. Can you speak to some of the potential of modular in terms of particularly kind of the speed, the affordability, and the sustainability?
Sure. So the really the speed or the quicker occupancy is the big driver for a lot of developers, government agencies, the hospitality industry. It's a big driver for them, and it's a lot to what Jacek alluded to. You basically have two construction sites. You have the site where the building is going to be located, where you're doing all your foundation, your utilities, your setbacks, everything there. At the same time, you're constructing the building itself in an off-site location. So having these concurrent sites, if you will, allows for when the site's ready for the buildings. It's not uncommon for a 4 or 5, 6-story building to be under roof within a week. It's a matter of scheduling the delivery and the cranes, and those modules start stacking up rapidly. Now, there's still quite a bit of site work to do, the exterior finishes, the module-to-module connections, so forth. But by and large, the plumbing, electrical, mechanical are completed, substantially completed in the factory. So it really expedites the time to occupancy. You get more buildings, more homes into the supply chain faster. And that's really, I think, what's driving the Canadian initiative. Say, we have a shortage of so many houses. Let's find a way to build them faster and more efficiently. That leads to cost efficiencies. I'm not going to say cheaper, but there's less labor hours required to build a home in a factory versus on site. There's less weather delays. There's less waste and theft that occurs on sites. All those efficiencies you can gain in a factory do have a impact on lowering the overall costs. So the speed's the big one. Jacek again alluded to it. The environmental benefits are huge. There's substantially less waste going to the landfill when you build this way. In the factory, they control it. They can recycle much easier. They can reuse shorter pieces of lumber for the next project versus traditional site built where you see a lot of waste and dumpsters going to the landfill. So sustainability and speed are big ones. Cost efficiencies, overall efficiencies, I think is what we're talking about. Labor efficiency, material efficiency, and those do have an impact on the costs.
That's super helpful. Thank you so much. I want to get back to Jacek and the example that you provided, just to maybe kind of again ground some of the conversation. There's already been a pointing to the environmental benefits, but can you speak a little bit more to some of the benefits that you saw in your project? And also, the counter side to that, what were the challenges and barriers that you faced? And I'm going to also just kind of trying to be responsive to some of the questions that are coming up. And there's been a few people kind of interested in terms of the cost comparison for your project specifically. Are you able to speak to that? Did you have a sense of like how much doing it this way cost as compared to if you had taken a more traditional construction approach? If you don't have the answer to that offhand, that's okay. But anyways, essentially some of those benefits and your challenges and barriers.
Sure. I think maybe let's leave the cost question at the end. But that's similar to what it and Dwayne said. The big benefit is having those two construction at the same time, right? I think what we found from our end that we as an owner had a heavily involvement with an initial piece really during the design phase to make sure that everything's in there, right? Because once the design phase is completed, it splits. So we are doing the construction on site, and we're doing the construction in the factory. Honestly, it was amazing, right? Going into the factories and then seeing we had two separate factories. The hub building that we had was fully assembled on the factory floor before it was taken apart and delivered to the site. So I was able to walk through the building and see things before it was actually on site, which was kind of unique experience. But to Tom's point, it's that control environment is amazing, right? You're working on the factory floor. So typically when you have the units, when you look at the residential units, they're basically the same. So you have unit after unit. I have that one picture in my sliders when there's a floor plate of the unit kind of being down the rollers. So they're the factory we're in, they're able to have them on the rollers. So they kind of had them on assembly line. So they started with the floor layout and they did the walls. Then they did the insulation, the plumbing, the rough ends, and all that stuff was kind of going in step by step. So everybody knew what they're doing. So that's the economy of the scale. All the plumbers were coming in, electricians. They did the same things over and over, so they can improve this, right? That's how you get your improvement, by doing things over, right? So I think the module, when we look at the benefits, huge benefits of modular, is doing the same things over and over again the same way. I think when modular falls short a little bit, it's doing a unique thing. So if you have a building that has a lot of unique rooms, that's going to be harder to do. I'm not saying not impossible, but definitely harder to do as opposed to this. Now, thanks to the factory we're working with, the company they're CSA certified, so that helped us up with the inspections, because anything that was done during the construction at the factory, because it's certified, the unit is certified when it comes at the end, the building department was able to just accept it. And of course, the company extended them any visits they wanted to. They just came in once. They were kind of satisfied with this. We had our consultant to come in there on a regular basis, do the reports as well, and taking back your pictures. But having that controlled environment, it's there's no rain, there's nothing coming. So the wood is dry before it's fully assembled. When it comes to site, it's fully wrapped, right? So it never gets exposed on the wood side, on the construction. And again, the wastage of the materials, like Tom was saying, like it's it's clean. Like you go into these factories and it's unique. So let's talk about the cost. Yes, it is higher. So that's the big, I think, misnomer. It is, but it's higher, but it's not. Like initial cost when you're going to compare number to number is going to be higher. However, you have to look at it holistically, that suddenly you're 6 months less on site, for example, right? How much does that cost, right? There are other benefits that we don't see. And definitely, to me, if we design it right, you get a better building, right? At the end of the day, the building has to be designed to the minimum of code, right? So the buildings you're gonna get are gonna have minimal, but I think due to the modular construction, generally you're gonna get a better building that's tighter, more better built. And again, when you look at the labor shortages, that's another big question, because you have a constant pull around that factory that's not really site related, right? So these guys always have a work because all they do is modules, and you don't have to really ship this. All you do is ship the module to the site, and then you have a minimal amount of workers on site during the connections and those, you know, and some drywall work, and I don't know, some flooring pieces coming in, right, when we have the connections between the buildings. But yeah, the amazing piece too, it's like how the modules gets delivered, right? That module that we had was fully finished. Stuff was painted, flooring was done. We actually had furniture. We actually have bed furniture and all the appliances within the unit itself, right? Where we just came in and take some plastics off, and theoretically the building was operational.
Great. Thank you so much. It's so helpful. Dwayne, maybe I'm going to ask you a little bit about what are some of the challenges that you've seen or heard about in the sector, and how do you think standards and training can help address these challenges?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, the growing pains that Jacek was talking about, they're not uncommon. One of the big takeaways from the research policy papers we've been doing is that, yeah, there's enormous potential, but there are challenges that can impact success, and it's a bit of a learning curve sometimes. Things such as, you want to think modular early on. You don't want to create these big free flowing designs. Reminiscent of Gaudi, and then say, okay, let's make this out of modular. You have to sort of think practically, repeatability and things like that. And that's where sometimes people can get tripped up because of the methodologies that are traditionally used for, conventional construction, and the number of different steps you go through. A couple other things. First, there's a knowledge gap. So a lot of developers and architects, even regulators, they're not really familiar with the processes yet, and that's understandable. But in addition, there's the financing models, certification requirements, a lot of things that are different and need to be understood. But finally, I think probably most significantly, it's that regulatory uncertainty. And approval systems are designed for conventional builds. So modular projects sometimes can face delays while authorities figure out the compliance. So that was part of the reason we dove into, you were mentioning training. That's part of the reason we dove in and developed the modular training. And what it is a series of online courses that can walk through how modular differs from traditional construction, key planning and certification steps, even what regulators and industry needs to know to streamline the approvals, because at the end of the day, we want to make this work even better. So it's a really important step in building that confidence and capacity across the sector. And if we can close these knowledge gaps, we can really help unlock some of the real benefits of modular construction.
Hey, Dwayne, can I piggyback off of what you said? And I think it may address one of the questions in the chat. That knowledge gap, that's huge. I think there's confusion still about the role of the standards versus the National Building Code. And if we leave with nothing else today, we have to build to the National Building Code. The standards Dwayne and CSA are working on help that regulatory process, the factory approval, the quality control, the design in the factory. But at the end of the day, your building has to meet the codes and requirements where it's located, not where the factory is located. So I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, Dwayne, or.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, National Building Code is the baseline, the model code that we use in Canada. But in the provinces and territories, it can be adopted differently. Their own iterations of that, and they may reference modular differently. And I do know right now everyone's taking a look at that to see how do we get that unity across the country as far as how modular is identified, within the building code. So CSA 277, that's the factory certification. That's how you approve how the units are approved in the factory and actually the factory themselves. But like Tom said, when that certification is happening, it's to the building code within that province or territory.
Yeah, if I can add to this too, I think the big piece from this is that experience, right? We were lucky enough that we ended up with a team that did a number of these projects for a number of years. So on the design end, so they knew exactly where we can have the benefits and what they need to do, and having that really experience was priceless, I would say. Also on my team, I had pretty good on the owner side. We had a pretty good team that understood really what is being asked of them, right? And we're able to articulate what we're looking for, right? In order to get those benefits. And I think the projects, you can see how this came out because we're pushing the boundaries. We understood what the limits are and what we can do with it. And that comes from inexperience, nothing else. Yeah.
Question for all of you. From your perspective, what do you think is needed for modular construction to kind of fully realize its promise of accelerating new home construction?
There's a lot to unpack in that little question. I'll jump in, and part of it is what Dwayne alluded to: consistent standard regulations across the province, across the country. We're talking about a manufacturing process. A factory wants predictability, wants certainty. I know that if I build in BC or Ontario, this is the approval process. This is the review process. The challenge we have now is so many projects are bespoke, completely custom works of art. That doesn't always lend itself well to factory built. So I think standardizing those regulations nationwide would be a big boon to the industry. That's one. I'll let the others chime in.
Well, I got a couple probably. First would be that regulatory alignment. I think that's really, really key. The current permitting and zoning process are, again, designed for the more conventional approach. So, we have delays. So harmonizing how the building codes, recognize modular and the standards for it, as well as streamlining the approvals process could make a big difference. But I always go back to knowledge and capacity building and the importance of that, regardless of what the technology is. So we have many developers and regulators and financiers who still aren't familiar enough with the modular process. And so again, that's why we have to kind of keep working on that, building more education and understanding of it, because it actually helps us at CSA. The more people are involved in and understanding the process, the more feedback we can get to improve the standards that we have, to continuously, create that evergreen system of innovative standards. And I'll throw one more in. I know that it's not the area the CSA works in, but I do know that financing and procurement is a really big issue. Modular projects have a lot of front-loaded costs, so the financing models can be tricky. I know people are talking about this, trying to figure out how to kind of, square that. But I think that's going to be something that really needs to be tackled.
Yeah, you're right on. Dwayne, you mentioned a lot of differences. And that's what it is. It's everything about construction was written for a site-built world, from the procurement to the insurance, the subcontracts, the financing, and we're a little different. So it's coming up with tools and resources that let the end user have some degree of comfort saying, okay, it's different, but I understand it. And I can understand these risks and mitigate them. Yeah, all those decisions front end loaded. If you think about the factory, if they're building a home, if you build it conventionally, you can wait. And what color of walls do you want the paint, paint on the walls? What color of carpet? We need to know that now in the factory because they're procuring all that material up front and they're building those rooms. So all those design decisions go up front. Then I think it's pretty critical. We all agree there's a design freeze at this point before the factory hits the go button. No more changes, because once they start rolling, they could have 5, 10, 20 rooms out the door in a couple of weeks. And if someone comes back and says, hang on, we decided we want this. Now you have a major rework issue. So this early decision-making, lots of communication, and people see that as like a negative. I'm like, why is that negative? You're ironing out, you're getting everybody on the same page early so that the project will run smoothly.
Yeah, to your point, I think I like that about the process myself, because we did really have that intense month of really, 3 times a week meeting with the team and just going through everything, and everything was fresh, and we can really focus on that one project as opposed to running around and then, oh, what did we talk about 2 weeks ago, right? What did we selected? It was really focused. The team stayed on it, and I think what came out of it was kind of like, yeah, okay, everything came out because everybody was on it, I think. But that's something people have to understand too, that they have to put more time into it. And to kind of Dwayne's comment too regarding the changes of things, we had for example, units are built in the factory, right? So my contract doesn't allow me to pay you until stuff's delivered on site and really assembled, right? So my contract doesn't allow me to pay the contractor. So we had to really find a way to do this around the contract, because we have to pay you as you're building the units in the factory. I'm not typically not in possession of them. However, the work is being done. Like, now are you going to be waiting 6 months for me to pay you, or 3 months before they're on site and assembled? So those are the little things that have to be ironed out, but they're not like big gaps, but they're small things, but you have to be aware of it as you're going into it.
There's been so much here. I have one more question for you all, and then but I'm going to ask it for kind of quick answers so that I can make some time to get to more of these questions from our participants. But in all likelihood, we have a lot of municipal leaders joining us today and learning from this webinar. So what is the kind of one piece of advice that you would give to municipal leaders that want to support modular construction in their communities?
My quick answer is tour a modular factory. Find one near you, tour it, go in and see how this is happening. Touch it, feel it, understand it. It's a very visual industry. It's hard to explain on a webinar, but you get in the factory and see those modules going down the line, you kind of have that, oh, I get it moment. So that, to me, that's my advice.
Jacek?
Sure. So I think for me, the big one was not really look at the initial price of the building, right? Look at the holistic project cost from start to finish, because I think a lot of people are looking at this, yes, it's a little bit more money, but the time that you save, and also challenges from each side, because I see this like downtown Toronto, for example, if we do this modular, right, like the amount of space that you're required to be on site, it's a lot less, right? No waste, no disruption to your neighbors, right? So there's a lot of good things come out of it. So look at the whole project holistically and look at all the pros and cons, and then don't just look at the lowest number, because that's not always. There's things that we can't put a number on, right? Like if you do a disruption to your neighbors for next 6 months of construction or 10 months of construction, like how do you put a price on that? You can't, because with this construction, if we can only do it for 3 months, that's so much better. So
for me, I'd say just keep building the knowledge. I just dropped something into the chat. It's all the resources that we have on our website that you can go to. So you can learn more about it, take some training, all of these things. But you're going to only be comfortable when you feel like you have enough knowledge.
Great pieces of advice. Thank you so much, and really appreciate you sharing the resources as well. I think everyone's going to find those really helpful. Okay, a few questions. We'll get to as many as we can, and if you have one and you haven't already put it into the Slido, please do so. I'm going to start by asking, and whoever feels like they want to jump in, please do. How do you see more rural areas being served by modular, or municipalities that do not have water infrastructure?
You know, I'll jump in, and again, anyone else can. I think it's more beneficial for rural areas because of that labor shortage we talked about. It's hard to find construction crews and all those trades and you know, all the necessary components in a rural area. One of the things our industry is great at is building in one place and shipping somewhere else. We've built entire small cities in Fort McMurray, northern Alberta. We can ship them anywhere. So I think it's more advantageous for rural communities.
Yeah, definitely. I think I can chime in on that. I mean, one of our projects was in Beaverton, which is, you know, for like 100, somewhat 20 kilometers away from Toronto. And definitely, if we would have to build this fully on site, we would definitely have challenges trying to build, even trying to get, trying to get workers to get there just to do the final finishing on this was always a challenge, because they have to drive in. Generally, they drive in from Toronto, and they would probably, you know, they would get a hotel in the area and try to finish it that way, right? So that was that's definitely, that did help us out. Now, from the water and I'm assuming sewer perspective, I don't think that's an issue. All you'd have to do is just get a bigger site, right? A new rigorous septic system and a well, and that's not different than any other buildings. And
Right.
we actually own a number of buildings, or the region does, that we have them, and they're fine. They've been running no problems.
Great. Okay. Super helpful. And I'll just mention as well, in terms of infrastructure, that you know, FCM's advocacy has also been kind of very clear around the need for funding for housing and enabling infrastructure. You know, in addition to kind of building all the housing that we need, municipalities need support to deliver the infrastructure that's required to actually operate those houses and have communities too. So kind of the flip side of the rural question, we also got a question about kind of more, I guess, infill and dense cities like Montreal. Can you speak to the outlook for modular building, say an 8, 10, 14, or 20-story high building?
Yeah, I can give it a shot. You know, our industry is really only limited by the building code. 20-story buildings are not common in our industry. We're seeing a lot more of them in the UK and places like Singapore and some other Asian countries. 30, 40, 50-story, I believe, is the tallest one we've seen for modular, volumetric modular construction. More common, it's the sweet spot is this 4 to 8-story multifamily mixed use, you know, retail on the bottom, maybe even site built podium with, you know, 3 or 4 stories on top. That's kind of the sweet spot. So not a lot of super tall modular buildings at this point in the industry's evolution.
Yeah, if I can, I think, Tom, it's mainly because of the code issues, right? When you look at this, the code did not allow us to before, and that's why you build podium in order to go a little bit higher with the wood construction, really, because most of them are wood construction, right? So the code just changed in Ontario, so we are allowed, actually is following what, like I said, what's in BC, so we're going to be able to build higher. So I'm expecting to see a lot more of these higher buildings coming into Ontario, which is exciting. And I think maybe that brings that point again about that uniformity of a code going throughout, right? Like in BC you can, and in Ontario you can't, and then we have to wait for a code change, and probably in Quebec you got something different. So that would be great to know if we can do this, because then you can design something that you can relatively reuse in a way, and that's where your savings are, right? Reusing similar designs.
Well, yes, that's a great point. Canada, our industry primarily builds with wood. lot of wood in Canada. Malaysia, it's concrete boxes. Parts of Europe, it's steel. So they, by code, they can go a little higher with steel and concrete than they can with wood.
And about kind of best practice examples. Are there kind of best practice examples you can speak to, I guess, outside of the one that we already heard about today, which I think is a great one. And there's particularly the point of asking about military housing or student housing.
Student housing is a big market in North America, and I think it lends itself to that repeatable design. You know, it's kind of like multifamily housing, kind of like hotels. Hospitality is a big market. But our industry also does a lot of healthcare and educational facilities across Canada. So the new budget that came out, there may be some opportunities there for other types of infrastructure project. I don't want to leave everyone with the perception that it's only for housing. It is not. It can be, it's just a different way to build. Whatever you want to build, you can build in a factory in modules, whether that's a school, a hospital, a house, hotel, whatever.
Do we get through the barrier in transportation, risk, and regulation of modular units and the modular warehouse site location, since it's typically quite big?
Wayne, you want that one? Didn't we work on a paper on related to the design, transportation, installation?
Yeah, transportation definitely is something, you know, that we looked at, and you know, from the perspective of, you have to be very careful transporting the units. It has to be, you know, designed with that in mind to make sure that they're protected when they're transported. They're protected not only from, you know, the elements, but also from things such as vibration, deflection, and all those things. So that's something that's you know, taken care of by the designer of the mods. You know, one of the things that, you know, is always a consideration is, you know, if you're building or planning to build something in an urban center, you better make sure that the units aren't wider than the road allowances, et cetera. So, you know, how do you get around those kind of transportation issues and permissions, et cetera? I know that is one thing that, I don't have the solution for it, but it is something where, you know, in talking with modular manufacturers, they're fine when they go from point A to point B, but going from point B to point C, the rules change. And it is definitely something that has to be carefully thought out, you know, from end to end.
Yeah, it's pre-planning. We've, you know, here in the States, we've built buildings in New York City, which is no easy task. But our challenge is all those little states in the Northeast, they all have different transportation regulations. So some smart person's got to figure out the route from the factory to the site, meeting everyone's transportation requirements and not not tripping up anywhere along the way. But factories are very good at that. They deliver really all over the world, so they've got some smart logistics people.
Yeah, so from experience, I can tell you that was one of the initial that was done during the initial design with both of our projects. So we looked at this, and the team did look at how we're gonna get the modules in, and that kind of looked, you know, what's the width of the modules that we can do maximum based on the road allowed, right? So I don't think that's an issue. It's just part of the logistics coming in. And you know, as Dwayne mentioned, they're you know, our modules came in shrink wrap, right? So we have no issues with the environment and weather coming in. So even if it was raining during that transport, wasn't really an issue. They came in on site. You know, did we have a few cracks in the wall here and there? Yeah, but that's an easy thing to fix as opposed to trying to rework the whole wall, right? So don't expect that, you know, there are probably going to be few here and there, but they're very minimal.
Thanks, Jacek. Sorry, Jen, I'm going to have to jump in here. Before we wrap, I just wanted to say a quick thank you to Tom, Dwayne, Jacek, Jen for these timely insights into this exciting construction practice. I want to also say thank you to CSA Group for your support of today's discussion. As mentioned, the recording of today's conversation will be posted to fcm.ca in the coming days and sent to all registrants by email. We'll also be sending along additional links and resources mentioned today during our session, so please feel free to share with your colleagues. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, our next FCM Collective webinar will take place on November 27th. It is entitled Building a Robust Visitor Economy in Rural and Remote and Northern Communities. Thanks very much. Be well, everyone.
Thank you.